Francis Hurd is standing by. Francis, over to you.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Yes, it's day 3, and we were meant to have originally the results on day 2, already an understanding of who the ANC top 6 are. Those results are now pending. Voting took place starting after midnight, so you can just imagine the sense of exhaustion sort of permeating the Nasrec grounds today. And what we're waiting for now is counting to be done. It shouldn't take too long. Remember, there are less than 5,000 delegates, but we have no idea. It could be 2 hours, it could be a couple of more hours after that. Huge anticipation, so exhaustion on one hand, but major anticipation, and we are going to continue with our rolling coverage from Nasrec, and I'm joined now. See, I have economics on the brain. I'm joined by Lebohang Pheko, political economist, and let's just start with the rand, please. It's been incredible. So just the background here is that the rand rose by about 5%, 3% Friday, yesterday, big movements as well. Basically on the expectation that Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa will be elected. We've seen some moderation. Right now it's back again below 13 Rand after hitting a 3.5-year high. But some moderation, and what I've heard, and tell me what you've heard, is that maybe this is being used against him, that he is the business-friendly candidate, but does that mean that he is not committed to a developmental state, to pushing transformation? Do you think that that has hampered him?
It could have. I mean, I think the one thing is that we should be quite careful, Francis, not to allow the rand, the elasticity of the rand, the bellwether of governance efficacy and economic efficacy, and also the suitability of a particular candidate to govern this country effectively. So I think that we have gotten into a mode where we rely on markets, and international markets in particular, to almost dictate or to be the litmus test for how the moderation or not of the rand, and then this is then used then to suggest that a particular policy instrument is or is not suitable. Where Deputy President Ramaphosa then slides into this scenario is that historically he's been seen to be extremely market friendly. Of course, he has a background in the trade unions, but that's a long time ago. It's ideologically also a long time ago, and I think that a lot of his remarks over the years haven't shown him to be per se people-centered. His vision for development is very much related to financial development, market development, and the development of the small cluster of wealth which has been concentrated within a few industries and around a few people, him being one of them. So I think that his broader vision for the country remains to be tested. I think we should, one scenario that I've heard, one descriptor that I've heard about him is that he likes markets more than he likes people. And I think that you need a person who's got a sense of a people-centered development model. We can't rely on markets to do everything. We can't rely on markets to, per se, create jobs, to take people out of poverty, to reduce inequality, and we would need a far more intentional strategy. He has got his 10-point plan, which we can talk about, but I'm not sure that if that's sufficient.
This must, well, it couldn't have helped him that there were reports that he didn't even read the transformational reports being produced by Lonmin Mining Group when he was there before Marikana. So could this have been used even last night by the NDZ camp?
Look, I mean,
come on our side, because she's the one who's going to push development.
Both of the candidates have a lot of baggage, and I think we shouldn't forget that, and we cannot forget that the 3 M's that I've been talking about relating to Mr. Ramaphosa: McDonald's, McBuffalo, and Marikana, and that's a real stain that we should not he should not be allowed to escape accountability for that, and I think that speaks to a kind of a culture, a being, a sort of ethical universe that in that moment he was not present in. It took a long time for him to acknowledge. It took a long time for him to apologize, and I think the apology versus the damage that has been done is really, a petty gesture.
If he is economic economically friendly, if he's business friendly, if he's investment friendly,
market friendly,
surely he has to care about transformation, because things cannot go on when we have unemployment rates like we do, when we have inequality that we do, when we have resentment because of a lack of transformation like we have. So surely he would have to, and this is logical, care about all those things. He just wants to do it maybe in a calmer, more investment-friendly way.
I don't think the two go together. So the logic is flawless, but I don't think that means that we can't impose our logic on him. And I think historically, in terms of his own business model, he's been about, like the Shanduka, the black umbrellas, creating small hubs of entrepreneurship. But that to me really isn't a mass rollout. It really is about reaching out, reproducing smaller pockets of wealth amongst the people who may be able to access resources already. I don't see Cyril Ramaphosa as a man of the people. I don't think he can, by any stretch of the imagination. He looks very uncomfortable to me when he's wearing a t-shirt. Even here, I don't think he can by any means be viewed as a man of the people. And I think there's some people who even argue that he was in many ways captured long before Saxon Road and all these other things happened. I mean, by the Oppenheimers, by the De Beers family, etc. And I think that we have to be very, very, very nuanced in our analysis of both the candidates, because both of them bring some problematics which could have huge bearing on the economy.
Say he gets investors on board. Say there's this huge confidence behind him if he gets elected to the top spot. He gets that investment strike, as it sometimes is called. That comes to an end. Locals invest, foreigners invest. Wouldn't that get the momentum going, at least in creating jobs? Well,
you see, we have to do things with intentionality, Francis. So jobs don't create themselves. Of course, what the state does is it should create a conducive environment. We also have a lot of institutions in this country which should be a lot more robust. We have the IDC, we have the NEF, CEDA, and those sorts of outfits, which really should be. The NEF's mandate is to produce millions of millionaires. So, if anything, we should actually galvanize the existing instruments that we have to enable a much more robust economic growth. But we should also deal with the structural deficits. We have an inherited economy which has a surplus of people who are not only unemployed but have been unemployable. So the official figures are 26.8% plus or minus. Unofficially, it's always been much higher. 40% plus. So we need to go back to the structural issues. And I think that what I find worrying about the market-friendly approach is that it takes us back to trickle-down, which has failed spectacularly, not only in South Africa, but most parts of the world where it is attempted. I mean, growth doesn't bring development. Development brings growth, and that has to be people-centered, bottom-up development, where you go back to basics, where you create a labor-absorbing economy for a start, and you also create the stopgaps where people who are not employed will become employable, whether by retraining, whether by small grants to enable, job seekers allowance, those sorts of things, to enable them to enter into the market economy, an education system which is much more compatible to the kind of economic growth that South Africa wants to have. Remember that by, the things that we've been saying, that we want to be producing 5,000 PhD graduates every year. That's what Agenda 2013, or our 2030 plan says. We are nowhere close to that. All of this is because we've been told that if you have a high amount of PhD graduates, your GDP growth also appreciates by 0.5% or something like that. We're nowhere close to that. So this is a total, we need a more holistic approach to how we recreate and how we re-galvanize the economy. But this whole market-friendly rhetoric is just not enough, and for me it's not entirely convincing.
All right, say Cyril Ramaphosa comes in. What should he do and say to help people like you who believe that you cannot just rely on business and be market friendly? And won't he have maybe the clout to then start being bold in pushing the things that you say he's ignored? Yeah, so I mean, look, he has talked about the need for boldness, hasn't he? He's talked about this in this, the New Deal, the 10-point New Deal.
If he did actually implement some of the New Deal, that might actually be fairly useful. He talks about the skills gap, and that's very important. So it's not just about education, free or otherwise, it's about quality education.
Yeah.
It's about an education system which is matched to the kind of economy that we want to grow.
Aligning skills to where they're needed.
Exactly. He talks about trying to grow the economy to 3% GDP in a year. I'm not sure about that. And then by 2023, up to 5%. Again, what do we need to get there? We need to really re-engineer our agricultural sector. We need to re-engineer our manufacturing sector. We need to produce much more value-added products locally. We also need to be mindful that a lot of our economy has been, mineral-based, etc., and not usually appreciably so, not value-added. You just send stuff out like that. That has to change completely. I don't think that the industrialist policy, the new industrialist, the black industrialist, is quite the way to go, because I think that potentially creates a whole new group of oligarchs, of industrial oligarchs. But what we could do is to put much more investment into SMMEs. Remember that SMMEs, they employ 65 to 70% of people, small businesses, family businesses. So if our existing NEFs, IDCs were much more effective, they would be able to then support these businesses so that they don't have to go under different tax regimes, for example, different even bank loan and repayment systems whereby you don't have to pay back in the same way at the same interest rate, to allow smaller businesses to grow. We have to look at import and export tariffs to protect our own industries and to protect local industry, indigenous industries. And then these are the things that are going to grow our economy much more effectively in the long term.
But to leave Cyril Ramaphosa, and let's move on to the other main candidate.
Yes.
It sounds like in finality you suspect that he doesn't appreciate the need for these other building blocks that need to happen around getting that business confidence back.
Possibly, but I mean, his 10-point plan it's fine, but I mean, it's always about how is this going to happen? I mean, I think, to go to 3% GDP in a year how is this going to happen from a just under 1% point of departure? It would be awesome. So I mean, I think both of their plans, the deficit would be that we're not told how. So let's move then to NDZ. She has the Manifesto for Change, I think she's called hers, and of course it draws its inspiration from radical economic transformation. Whatever that may or may not mean to many people, what it has meant to a lot of investors, of course, it has turned them off a bit. It has turned them off her quite a bit, because it's a rhetoric that's associated with a particular cabal of people. It's associated with the capture of state assets. It's almost a proxy for the sort of nepotic redistribution of benefits and of favors that we've seen in a really crude and vulgar way over the last couple of years in particular. So this is the rhetoric that she's come to be associated with. However, when you have a closer look at this Manifesto for Change, there isn't that much difference between what she is saying and what Mr. Ramaphosa is saying. So she makes some useful observations around land redistribution, around agricultural redistribution, which is of course to do with the very slow land redistribution process that has taken place, and also the need to build agricultural economics, although it's not phrased in that way. She also talks about urban land as well, and the fact that it's not appropriately utilized, and of course that a lot of people in urban areas, we have a crisis with housing in urban areas, evictions, etc. She also talks about in very vague terms, women in the economy, but not very well articulated at all. She talks about unemployment. They actually touch some of the same notes with a slightly different tune, but again, the implementation steps are very weak.
So, exactly, and I want to talk about each of those points, but overall, I mean, the big debate is whether she will follow in the footsteps of President Jacob Zuma, whether she will protect him, whether she will just be a continuation of those economic policies. And there's a lot of debate around it. I don't know if you agree with me. When she does talk the economy, it does sound very similar.
Yes.
It sounds like maybe the same people are writing those economic speeches. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us are listening and hearing the same, and perhaps the round is hearing the same as well. And I think that her biggest hampering factor is that name. I mean, being a Zuma right now is it's a double-edged sword for her political career, and I think that wouldn't have been the issue if she had done a lot more to distinguish herself more, to pronounce more explicitly on the way that the state-owned enterprises, for example, have been functioning or malfunctioning. If she had said more at the important moments, even around the Nkanda report, the state capture report, and if she had hit the right notes at the right time, but I think many more of us would have more faith, and the markets would have had a lot more confidence in her ability to distinguish herself as an anti-corruption crusader in whose hands the economy is viable, vibrant, and is safe. And she hasn't done any of that.
Does it raise questions about her understanding of the economics as well, if she's not, like you say, bringing anything new or showing a deeper understanding beyond the sort of usual hymn sheet that we've been hearing people sing off?
I think it's unfortunate that she didn't do more to talk about her manifesto for change, and that it really has flowed very symbiotically and very seamlessly from the RET rhetoric and the RET, the RET hymn sheet that we've been hearing. And I think that this has hampered her. If she had spent even 12 months prior to this day talking about her manifesto for change, going into more detail on this roadshow, being seen to be less combative to forces for change, being far more inclusive. She's been combative with the media. She's been combative with the opposition. She's been combative towards the students. She has been combative to, she's said horrible things about, Model Cs and those students over there and all these things. And yet these are a future block of allies, future voters, future leaders, etc. And one has to also understand that the knowledge economy, which universities and institutions of higher education represent a huge part of, are very important potential allies. The knowledge economy, the skills economy, the technological economy, the green economy, etc. And I don't think that her manifesto for change seems to understand those notes and the complexities and the nuances of those interconnecting facets.
And the most controversial issue, land, tell me if you agree with me here. She speaks about it, but there's not a full understanding of who owns the land, how much needs to be redistributed, how much land government owns that has not been redistributed for years. So it seems a little bit like a blunt tool. Do you know what I mean? This is something I stand for, but what about issues of, is the land where all the wealth lies, or has a lot of the wealth been taken offshore anyway and held in shares? Should we not be looking at things like that? Do young people want land if you offer them the choice of land, money? I don't know if there's any of that nuance there.
Look, I think the land question remains, yes, indeed. The land question remains a deep philosophical question. She's not the first to articulate it, and I think it's almost it's an irony. I mean, this has been a position of several specifically the PAC for many years. The land is ours, and then of course the EFF, the ANC Youth League, and then as they broke away into the EFF, they also took on this land issue. It's not fresh and new, and I think the questions you raise are important, but land it remains an important philosophical and political sore point in this country, and the redistribution thereof. She hasn't mentioned really clearly how she distinguishes herself from the existing discourses that other parties and other movements have articulated over this. But there was a landless people's movement in this country, a very powerful, vibrant social movement in this country for many years. Not clear whether there's been any engagement, because those sorts of movements are the kind of movements that one would need to speak to, engage with, bring on side. So that when any kind of form of land redistribution has a critical mass. This also goes back to the skills gap and the skills deficit. Land redistribution, I think, is very important as a political and a philosophical principle, but it also needs planning. I mean, you need people who are willing to be agricultural economists, land technicians, etc., geologists, and all of these things. And I think that kind of layer is very necessary. I don't think even the EFF have given us that kind of layered analysis, nor has the PAC, who have historically been the bastions of this debate, also given us that layered, nuanced analysis. She isn't hitting any new notes, and nor is she bringing anything fresh to this debate.
Let's come back to this. We're speaking to political economist Lebohang Pheko, and we're live at Nasrec, and we are hearing that President Jacob Zuma is doing a walkabout of the centre, and we can see outside the media